because I have students who come and they're like, I just want to know, lay it out here for me. What do you guys believe about this? Or what do you believe about this? And I'm like, okay, in this one conversation that we get, I'm going to go through the thing, but I'm not going to say, well, we're going to look here at Leviticus 18, and we're going to look over here at Romans chapter 1. What I want to do is say, okay, tell me about yourself. How is it going?
Yes.
And just, not how's it going, you know what I'm saying? That I think...
Taking a holistic interest in the person coming to you, not dealing with them as a problem or a problem they have, you know, external to who they are as a human.
Well, that's, and that's just called doing, I mean, that's evangelizing, right?
Yeah, it's just a friendship,
Every person is called, exactly.
People sometimes say to me, like, how can I help my friend who struggles with porn? And I say, well, take a holistic interest in their life. Like, what books do they like? What Netflix shows are they watching? What are they doing next summer? What are they afraid of? Like, you ought to be interested in them, not how you can fix this part of them.
Yeah.
And that, in the long run, will actually be more effective because they'll trust that you love them and want their good.
And I wonder if that's part of what he's trying to get at when he says things like, God made you this way. And that there's that, because that's so distorted and it's so destructive.
Just tell us why. Explain why.
Basically undercuts one of the foundational doctrines of Christianity, which is original sin. And the recognition that while we're made good, we also have this original wound. There is this tendency that not everything that I want is the right thing. Not everything, just because I experience a desire or attraction to something, doesn't mean that God wants that for me. And so, like, no, but this is deep-seated. This is ingrained in me. I've never known not this. Therefore, God, in His perfect will, made me this particular way. He's like, wait, so that basically means that sin means nothing. Sin is any sin,
right?
Because I'm
tempted to look at porn.
Name any, honestly, any sin
I'm tempted to steal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have an inclination to cheat on my wife.
Anger, like you know, I've always had a short temper.
I have an Irish temper.
Right, exactly.
That's who I am.
And that sense of saying that ultimately you move from, which is a positive move, acceptance, which is okay. I acknowledge this about myself. I've always struggled with hiding. I'll go back to another topic. Like I always struggled with hiding, but that's acceptance. Okay, what do I do with that? Like, and then I turn to the Lord, turn to the church, and say, what do I do with this? Turn to the wisdom of the people around me and the wisdom of the ancients to say, okay, when I experience this thing, what is a wise way forward? Versus, I accept this, and now accepting it means that I act on it, and that's completely different. And no one, I mean. When I say it's so destructive is, let's say, just God made me this way, A, because I blame God, B, because then now I need to find I have justification for anything I act on.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I acknowledge this in myself, and now I bring it to the Lord.
Yeah.
Again, not as a false self, but this is truly what's inside me. One is a way that tries to twist what I find as shame into what I celebrate in myself. And the other is, okay, here's what I find as shame, and I'm going to invite the Lord into it to do something with it, whatever that is, to hold me in the midst of it, so that I recognize that I'm not identified with my shame. Because think about the move from shame to pride is I'm still identified with it. Like, that's still me.
Yeah.
What I saw as my greatest shame is now my greatest pride, as opposed to, this doesn't define me. This could be a part of my experience, it's part of my reality, but it doesn't give me my identity. And this is the big thing in the book I was trying to talk about. This is like the difference between experience and identity.
Okay. Yeah.
So what experience in our life would you ever advocate someone to say, you had this experience, therefore that is you? There's no experience that we'd ever, like, you know, I'm angry, therefore I'm an angry person. Like, well, no, you wouldn't say do that. I'm a smoker, right? I smoke, therefore, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think one of the more profound examples, I think at least, is someone who's been abused. So it's a big thing that affects one's whole life. I can see it affects how I look at myself, how I see other people, how I see God. But you wouldn't say, yeah, that's who you are. Someone abused you, you are a victim. And now that's your deepest identity, because you've never known any relationship that wasn't tainted by this. You've never known any prayer that wasn't tainted by this. You've never known anything that wasn't affected by this. You would never encourage someone to use that experience as their identity.
The response, though, is these examples you've brought up are all negative experiences, homelessness, smoking, being abused. And what they'll say is your belief that homosexual acts are disordered just comes from your Christian upbringing, which is based on a false puritanical religion anyway. What you don't understand, Father Mike, is that acting this way is actually a beautiful thing. I'm acting out of a good part of me, the truest part of me. It's not a response to a trauma I've received. Rather, it's when I began engaging in who I truly am, when I came out and told people that this is how I've always been and entered into a loving gay relationship, that I found a freedom that I've never had before. And that's what you're telling me is wrong. And so to equate that with these negative experiences is the problem you have, not what I have.
That makes sense. And I would say two things to that. One is there's a difference between relief and freedom. So if I spent a large part of my life living under the shame of secrecy, living under the shame of like I don't want someone to find this out. I'm dealing with this or I'm wrestling with it privately, or I'm feeling the weight, and then I get to this place where I've come out and I'm met with welcome. I'm met with a community. I'm met with someone who cares about me and knows this about me. Because, so many people's stories are, they just can't find this out about me. If they just, if the people who claim to love me found this out, they wouldn't love me anymore. And then someone comes out and they find welcome and they find that people do love them. That's a relief. I'm not living under this shadow, under this secret anymore. But relief is not the same thing as freedom, and relief is not the same thing as actual true peace. It feels like peace, and it can feel like some freedom to a certain degree. But I would just ask the question: is it real now freedom, or is it just the fact that you're no longer living in shame, which is not something that the Lord or the church was asking you to do in the first place?
So to play devil's advocate, the response might be, you're psychologizing. You're telling me that my experience of freedom is relief, but you don't know me. And it's also kind of condescending to think that I'm not sophisticated enough to know the difference. They could say, yes, I agree with you that there was a sense of relief in coming out and finding a supportive community. And now that relief has passed, I have entered into a deeper freedom that I've never had.
And that's a good point. And I would acknowledge that. Like, again, I wouldn't want to. That's one of the things when people say, they'll criticize me if I believe someone who says that I've always felt this way. I'm like, yeah, I believe that. No, it came from something else. I'm like, no, I can only trust their experience. If someone reports to me, here's what they have experienced, then like, I'm not going to argue with that. I'm not going to say, no, this comes from your father or comes from whatever. So you're absolutely right. I wouldn't argue with that.
But I like what you said. If you're counseling someone, given the fact that you're coming from the premise that this behavior is wrong, then I like what you said. I can at least ask the question.
Well,
you're not telling them. You're saying you're trying to make there's a distinction here. It would be like if tomorrow I came. This is perhaps disanalogous to maybe too disanalogous to be helpful. But suppose I've been having doubts of Christianity for a while, and I've got this bloody show thing and Aquinas stuff, and now I'm like I don't think God exists, and I'm going to come out. There would be a community online that would really be thrilled that I would do this and would welcome me and would praise me, and I would want to kind of come up alongside them and hear what they're saying to offset the disapproving voices. So there's that sense of relief. I would get that, but it wouldn't mean freedom.
Well, also would mean that this battle that you've been engaged in.
There's a release.
Exactly. Like, no, I'm no longer fighting this thing
Not just
anymore.
a relief, a release.
And so, I've laid down my arms and I've laid it down on this one side. As opposed to, okay, I have to keep going. It's like someone who would say, again, it's a negative example, but I've been really having a tough time in my marriage, and the family duties and kids at home and stuff, and this other person has been very, very attractive to me, and just, you know what,
when I'm with her, I come fully alive.
I'm free, and
I like who I am.
I've never felt this way not with my current wife and not with my kids, and I feel like I have to be someone else. But now I don't have to be someone else. With her, I get to be really who I really am. You say, okay, there's a certain feeling of freedom, a certain feeling of release, relief. Because why? Because I've given into something that I was battling with anyways, go on.
And this is excellent. Yeah. And then the question is, well, does God want me to be unhappy? And I think sometimes you say, yes, very much yes. He would rather you be unhappy and faithful now than happy now and wrong and damned and destroyed a family.
Well, even that sense of like, going back to the example you had mentioned before, I said there's two things. One is possibly freedom is undescribed, or freedom might be word for it. I could also say this is relief or release. Yeah. The other thing would be someone reports and says, I'm in a loving relationship, and you're conflating an addiction to pornography to this relationship that I'm in that brings me out of myself, and that I know I'm welcomed, I know I'm known, I'm cared for, I'm loved. Like, so good. I remember a bunch of years ago, there was a talk I gave on a college campus, and after the talk, this young woman stood up. Like, Father Mike, I remember she said used to. I used to listen to your homily podcasts all through high school. I'm like, okay, what's coming now? And she said, and thank you for your talk. He's really respectful, which I always appreciate, because she's like, I've been dating this woman for however long, and she makes me more generous, she makes me more patient, she makes me a better person, all these kind of things. And what do you say to that? And I remember I was like, well, actually, everything you described, I want to affirm. Everything you described sounds like a good relationship where this person is calling you out of yourself. This person is making you more generous, more patient. You have to die to yourself. You have to truly choose to love them in so many ways. Everything you described, the church can affirm. What you haven't described is a genital sexual relationship.
Yes.
And that's what the church would say is problematic. So when someone says, but look at all these great things, it's like, everything you pointed to, we would say yes. It's this particular expression that we'd say, and at this point is where love stops, and in some way, use creeps in. And we could say that about any different relationship that you'd say.
I love what you've said before. We've been on a panel discussion before at a Steubenville conference, and I remember you said, this is not us and them.
Right.
It's just us. Can you talk about that?
And that's the distinction is, I think in so many ways, this is a whole different topic, but what I keep calling in my mind identitarianism, and what that is I get my identity from the group I'm part of. Yeah. And so my identity is I'm part of this group. So I am either my race, or I am my gender, or I am my class, or I am my nationality, whatever that thing is, like, that is my deepest thing, and everyone else is other. Yes. And that's why you talk about, like, or people in our culture now talk about, like,
this is where communism starts to creep in.
Well, honestly.
The evil of communism.
People talk about being othered. Yeah. So that sense of like, oh, you're othering those people, that group of people. Other. Like, okay, yes. And the church others them because they're not part of the group. Fine. But here's what the church actually does. The church never approaches groups. The church only approaches individuals. Yes. And the Lord doesn't love y'all. The Lord loves you specifically. And so that sense of, like, when we evangelize, when we approach people, when we're in a relationship, when we're doing ministry, it's not, okay, you are your group, and now how do I, as my group, talk to you as your group? So how do I, as a white heterosexual male, talk to, like, here's this African-American homosexual female? Like, how does Father Mike talk to Jane? Yeah. As opposed to, because, okay, so other. So then we tend to at least use words that say, well, those people. Like, so here you and I are talking right now, and whoever's watching or listening to this would say, oh, there you are. To
cis,
exactly,
straight,
white males, from the Western world who have this vision, talking about these people who aren't in the room with them. And so they are talking about these others, and we are talking about them. And as long as we do that, I don't think we'll get anywhere, because ultimately what happens is it's us and them. Therefore, a lot of our conversations, maybe we failed up to this point, have to be, it's all about us in that sense of I have wounds that you don't have, and you have wounds that I don't have. You have strengths I don't have, and I have strengths you don't have. And someone who wrestles with or experiences a same-sex attraction is not something I experience or struggle with. But that doesn't mean that they're other. I don't know how to say this like this. It's just like, it's not them, it's just us. Was it 1 Corinthians that says, there's no trial that's come upon you that's not common to all human beings.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, no trial. Meaning everyone has their thing. Mm-hmm. And that it's just like, I don't know. I mean, I'm saying it inelegantly, I know.
Well, let me tell you an inelegant story that I think speaking to what you're saying. I was at a Steubenville conference, and after the talk, a teenager came up to me, and we were chatting for a while, and he shared with me that he had same-sex attraction. Now, this might be misunderstood, and I'm going to try and say it as best I can. I get that if someone is experiencing this, that this is a very profound part of them, and it ought to be respected and received and reverenced. But for whatever reason, I said, okay, you think you're special? You don't think I have shit that I'm dealing with? And I hugged him, and I think I hugged him first. And it was in that loving, smiling conversation that I was able to then say that. But he later told me that was actually, he's written a book about it. And
really?
In that book, he said it was the guy who wrote Confessions of a Gay Catholic.
Oh, yeah, life scene, yeah.
And he said that it was a very liberating kind of moment for him. But I think, so he received that the way I wanted him to receive it. Like, I love you. I reverence what you're saying. Dude, it's not us and them. It's not me and you. It's us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. And that's what I want to say to almost everyone who comes and talks to me about this is like, and? Kind of like, that's kind of the, I'm not like, just missing this big, profound, huge, you've revealed this to me about yourself. But that sense of, all right,
brother.
And so I remember hearing someone say this, they said when they came out to one of their good friends who was as Catholic young men, the friend said, okay,
and
if it wasn't this, it would be something else.
Yes. Yeah.
Yo, thanks for watching. You can watch the entire episode on YouTube if you want. You can listen to it at The Matt Fradd Show by subscribing on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And feel free to support me, patreon.com/MattFradd.